Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 14th of March, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather situation. Not a whole lot has been changing for the last several days, but little things from time to time can catch you unaware, and we would really prefer that you are aware of the changes that are coming your way. For example, in Southeast, which we'll talk about in just a minute. 800-472-0391 is a great way to stay up to date on the phone with your local weather information. Weather.gov/Alaska has low bandwidth options if you're not in a good cell phone place or a place that has very fast wireless service or Wi-Fi. You can certainly check in there for some of the low bandwidth options, or find this on your PC or Mac there if you like. Send us an email if you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's on the phone or the website there. We'd love to have that information so that we can make things better for you and your community and the next person that comes along. And certainly we want to help you find what you're looking for so that it's useful to you and that you and your community stay safe all the time. Let's take a look at some of the weather headlines. Waves of heavy snow are going to be passing through parts of Southeast tonight. That includes areas north of the Taku Inlet, around the Juneau region, and southward where winter weather advisories are posted there. Winter storm warning north of the Taku Inlet region. Blustery conditions are going to continue in south central. If you thought you were tired of the wind, you're not tired enough yet. We've got to wait a little bit longer for the weather to change and the pattern to shift to get rid of some of the wind in south central. So make sure things are still locked down tight there on the back deck and the flag is tied down well. Wind chills to about 50 below expected around the Denali region and the Alaska Range passes tonight. Most areas probably won't be quite that cold, but a north wind 15 to 30 miles per hour is going to do the trick and make it feel considerably colder there through the Alaska Range. And the last question I have for you is this typical for March? You know, we lose track of how the weather should be from year to year, if there is a should. The average there, and you shouldn't forget that March is one of, if not the driest months for Alaska. So really not too surprising that this is happening for many parts of western, interior, and even south central Alaska. Southeast, though, not so much. You're getting your fair share of snow. So a winter storm warning in effect for the Juneau area, generally north of the Taku Inlet. North of that, winter weather advisories are posted around Haines, all the way out toward Gustavus and southward toward Sitka. For the Juneau region, 4 to 8 inches of snow is possible. That'll start this evening and is starting now. And at times you could see up to 1 inch of snow per hour. So that's going to make travel a little bit difficult, could really drop visibility, and it presents a problem if your structure or home already has a lot of snow on it there. Keep in mind that 1 inch an hour can build up pretty quick there. So looking for totals around 4 to 8 inches. A winter storm warning will go until 7 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. Winter weather advisory shaded in yellow. That will also continue until 7 a.m. Lesser amounts of snow expected in that region, 3 to 5 inches of snow. The snow should not be quite as intense. A look further north shows that band of yellow there. That is the wind chill advisory that extends through mostly just the mountain passes there into the Denali region as well, for values that could feel as cold as 45 to 50 below tonight. Thanks to that north wind, 15 to 30 miles per hour. That'll continue into the morning hours of your Wednesday as well. Otherwise, everything's free and clear. No warnings, watches, or advisories anywhere else in your part of Alaska right now. A look at the satellite picture shows our double circulation system here. We have low pressure across the eastern Gulf. We have high pressure here across the Bering. And what does that do? That allows all of Mother Nature's cold air to drop right across the west coast of Alaska. So if you're looking at the ice around St. Paul and St. George and go, it looks like that's getting a little closer, you'd be right. As of last check, it's about 45 to 50 nautical miles or so north and east of St. Paul. And if you look really, really carefully here, this part of the cloud deck that's not moving, that would be the ice just south of Cape Newenham there, and of course into Bristol Bay. Looking at the moisture that's associated with the cloud cover in this circulation pattern, we can certainly pick up on some of those brighter white clouds moving across southeastern Alaska. Wave after wave after wave tonight will be passing through, and each one of those snow bands again could be capable of leaving behind about an inch of snow an hour, generally north of the Taku Inlet region. Again, out here across the west, it's mainly dry air. All of this is just cold, dry air moving across the west. Not a whole lot to speak of here across southwestern Alaska. There might be some gales coming up across the central and western chain, but by and large, the focus for active, windy, wet, snowy, and just kind of generally unsettled weather is right here across the eastern Gulf, blowing into southeastern Alaska. Generally dry conditions across the North Slope, Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, and all of our southwestern capes and villages there, as well as the peninsula and the chain. Here's a look at the weather map, and you can see what's going on pretty clearly here. Low pressure, the unstable part of Alaska's atmosphere, really focused on southeast, with low pressure just inside of British Columbia and southern Yukon at 987 millibars. Warm, wet air is pushing in across southeastern Alaska, slamming that into the mountains, and of course it's a perfect setup to wring out more snow and rain in your region. The rain seems to be kind of hit and miss across central and southern parts of southeast, but up north around Cross Sound, Gustavus, and down toward Juneau, we're certainly seeing snow setting up and falling there, and that's going to continue through the nighttime hours again, up to 1 inch an hour in some cases, maybe 4 to 8 inches where you are. Around Kotzebue Sound and north into the Kobuk and Noatak region, out west, parts of the Brooks Range, some light snow there, as well as around Savunga and Gamble this afternoon. Otherwise, it's high pressure across the Bering. You can see the effects of that's having across the clouds, just smashing those away across the central and western part of the ocean. Otherwise, ice across the west coast into Norton Sound, and for all the folks watching in Nome tonight. Tonight's forecast shows low pressure across the central and northern Gulf at 989 millibars. Notice that onshore flow still pounding into southeast. You'll see periods of rain and snow south of the front, but for those folks around the Haynesboro, all the way up toward Juneau, and certainly north of the Taku Inlet, that's where a lot of the snow seems to be focused tonight. Across the northern Gulf, there may be some periods of gusty conditions just outside of Prince William Sound, all the way around to Cross Sound and Cape Fairweather and Icy Cape around Yakutat as well. And notice how the clouds just kind of vanish from this weather picture here. That's that drier air descending from the Alaska Range. It will still be gusty through parts of Cook Inlet, the Barren Islands, and over Kodiak Island, but the further away from this low you get, the less blustery it should be. High pressure across the central chain sits at 1,029 millibars, and snow showers will be kind of hit and miss around St. Matthew through the Pribilofs, Unalaska, Nikolsky, and also across the Brooks Range and the western Arctic coast, as well as parts of Kotzebue Sound. Getting into Wednesday, low pressure does not move across southeast, so don't be surprised to see more periods of rain and snow floating through, even if winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings have come to an end for your region. Snow showers will be on the back side of this, and notice that that pressure gradient is still there. It's going to be there really for the rest of the week, so gusty conditions in south central and parts of the Copper River Basin will continue out across the northern Gulf as well. High pressure is trying to push a very weak band of snow across the northern Arctic coast there at 1,030 millibars. Probably won't amount to much, but you may see some light snow. Snow showers across the northern Bering, and rain and snow showers for the central and western Aleutians, with gusty conditions continuing over Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, and again, Cook Inlet. Here's Thursday. Not a lot of change. Again, 995 millibars across the central Gulf. Periods of wet and probably mixed precipitation across southeast and the northern Gulf. Snow across Prince William Sound and maybe parts of the Kenai Peninsula. Generally east. That would include Seward and maybe flirting with Kashamak Bay. Otherwise, breezy conditions continue, flowing from high pressure to low pressure. So count on the winds again, and some light snow around St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait, as well as parts of the Chukchi Coast out around Point Hope, out toward Point Lay. Out across the west, periods of rain and snow for the central and western chain. You can see warmer air is also trying to build in from the west, but still trying to counter that broad area of high pressure. Temperatures this afternoon, we're back in the 30s for southeast, a little bit cooler around Haines and Skagway, only in the 20s. 30s for Yakutat and Cordova, 20s for most of Prince William Sound, including Whittier at 22. Lower 20s for the Cook Inlet region, 27 in Homer, 21 in Anchorage, 20 in Talkeetna. As you got up into the Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks, only 9 degrees by 3 o'clock, 3 in Eagle. It was 9 in Northway, and temperatures around Toka, a little bit cooler there. Northward toward Fort Yukon, 7 above, 15 below in Anaktuvuk Pass, and anywhere from 0 to about 6 below from Kaktovik to Aktosuk. and Barrow at 5 below. Kivalina was 6 below, Kotzebue 10 below, 7 above for all of our friends watching in Nome tonight, 3 above in Unalakleet with 9 in Galena. Ruby was looking at temperatures today that were between about 10 to about 12 degrees. 7 above in Bethel. Nunivak Island was 20 degrees. 17 in Savunga. McGrath was 14. Bristol Bay temperatures were back in the teens and 20s today. Dillingham 25. 20s and 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint 30 degrees. 43 in Atka, while it was only 39 in Adak. 20s for most of St. Paul and St. George's Day today. 39 in Attu. Overnight low temperatures will stay anywhere from 15 to 20 below across many sections of the interior and northward. Look for southwestern readings to be in the single digits and low to mid-teens for Bristol Bay, 25 in Kodiak, 20s and 30s out southwest, 20s and 30s for southeast as well, with high temperatures tomorrow back in the upper 30s. Again, so that warm air is going to be flirting with your region even as precipitation continues. South Central shows highs tomorrow back in the lower 20s, 25 around Cordova, 25 for Kodiak as well, 5 above around Fairbanks. Northward, Barrow 8 below, 7 below around Kaktovik, 3 above in Nome and in Unalakleet tomorrow, with McGrath at a cooler 6. Here's a look at flying weather. It looks like MVFR conditions for the North Slope and staying out across the Bering Strait communities and out of Norton Sound in the morning. IFR conditions for St. Matthew, MVFR through a large part of the Bering and the chain, as well as the northern Gulf Coast and a good chunk of southeastern Alaska. By the afternoon, some holes in that, but IFR sets in across some of your northern parts of the Panhandle. Looks like Norton Sound stays fairly clear tomorrow, as well as areas around Nome and across regions just west of the Alaska Range and through the YK Delta. IFR expected around St. Matthew and west of the Pribilofs, with MVFR conditions continuing for the Bering Strait, or the Bering Sea coast, I should say, around the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. Here's your pass conditions themselves. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR throughout your day tomorrow. As we get into Wednesday in Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, things look pretty good if you're going back and forth. Heading out west through Rainy Pass, VFR conditions are expected. Same goes for Windy Pass tomorrow, but remember, turbulence could be an issue. Isabel Pass, VFR conditions there. Mentasta Pass out east looks okay at VFR. Tanita Pass also VFR. Portage Pass looks pretty good, but maybe blustery. And Chilkoot and White Pass, MVFR to IFR conditions expected again with snow in the region. Freezing levels show that surface freezing line is kind of hovering up around Haines and Skagway right now out toward Yakutat, and then takes a nosedive with the cold air pouring southward. And we've got some bubbles of warmer air aloft there. Levels aloft over the central chain as high as 4,000 feet over Adak and Atka right now. Icing potentials there, but kind of hit and miss. Light to isolated moderate across parts of southeast and the northern Gulf between about 3,000 and 4,000 feet. And a little bit of moisture out there across the Gulf of Anadyr. Otherwise, no significant icing threat that we see at this point. Most of the moisture is really confined to parts of southeast. You can see why with the jet stream and that southwesterly flow pointed. Stronger winds there across the central and southern Panhandle, 60 to 100 knots. And we've got our friend, the northern jet, coming in here at about 50 knots, trying to blow some colder, drier air across the Arctic coast. High pressure still in charge of the North Pacific and the Bering, with southwesterlies across the western Bering at 55 to 80 knots, and then more of a northwesterly flow coming down the west coast, 55 to 80 knots there as well. Below that at 9,000 feet, we have our friend in the Gulf that just won't leave, even though we've asked them several times to move on. Low pressure there anywhere from 25 to 35 knots across the eastern Gulf, and northerlies coming down through the interior and the YK, about 30 to 50 knots there. High pressure across the central chain, guiding in those southerlies, so we are getting some warmer air up into the Bering Sea, but we're still dealing with a pretty substantial northerly flow down the west coast there. At 3,000 feet, pretty much the same story. You can see the northerlies coming in across the Arctic coast, over the Brooks Range, past Norton Sound, through the Yukon Valley, and all the way across the Bristol Bay region, about 35 to 40 knots or so. Easterlies blowing in along the Alaska Range from Yukon. Some of those fairly light, but then once they start working across the mountains and descend, the speed really starts to pick up, and that's where you're going to get in on that turbulence. There's southerlies working across southeast, 15 to 25 knots. High pressure sitting across the central chain with much stronger winds from the south across the western part of the Aleutians, up to 60 knots out there. Turbulence is going to be focused around the Cook Inlet region as that air is channeled and gapped right through some of those hot spots. Expect to find some thumps and bumps. Across the northern Gulf, watch for some occasional moderate there below 6,000 feet, some light to isolated moderate across a large part of southeast, and then west of the Wood River in the areas out west below about 4,000 to 8,000 feet or so. Occasional moderate possible there. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with an update on your sea ice edge and your marine weather. Stay tuned. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me today is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. And Cindy, we hear a lot about tsunamis in the news, probably a lot more than we used to, but let's remind everybody, what is a tsunami?
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Sure.
Tsunami is basically, it's really simple. It's just a disturbance in the water column. So the entire water column from the seafloor to the sea surface is disturbed by something major, usually a major earthquake. But it can also be a volcanic eruption, even an asteroid. Landslide is especially dangerous.
Okay, so if I'm sitting in my bathtub and I drop a bath toy, that could be a bathtub tsunami.
It is absolutely a bathtub tsunami.
Okay, very good. So Alaska is one of the states, or maybe the state, with the greatest amount of coastline, so tsunamis are a pretty major risk here in Alaska. Who is most at risk?
Yeah, Alaska is significant. We actually make most of the Pacific's tsunamis on the Aleutian Trench, and it's where the Pacific Plate is subducting underneath the American Plate, and we produce some very large, great quakes, and of course the most at risk is the Aleutian Trench.
Okay.
But that extends into south central Alaska as well. They're at huge risk, and then southeast Alaska's risk is really mostly landslide focused.
Okay. Are there any places along the Alaskan coastline that don't have a tsunami risk, or at least a very, very low risk?
Absolutely. The Bering Sea's risk is very low, and the Arctic's risk is very low as well.
Okay, so when we're talking about tsunami dangers, those are places that need to be monitored, but probably not really.
No, I mean, I won't say never.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know better.
Science knows better.
Right. So,
very good.
Near to never.
Okay. Well, let's just say you're on the coast, anywhere in Alaska. What are warning signs that tsunami dangers are threatening you right now?
This is super important because Alaska's greatest risk, especially out on the Aleutians and South Central, is a near-field tsunami, and then of course the landslides in southeast. It's even more intense because we can't.
Shorter warning time.
No warning time.
Okay.
The earthquake is the warning.
Okay.
And that is the most important thing for anybody to remember. The water can arrive in less than 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, at the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, we need to get the warning out in 5 minutes. So for those near-field tsunamis, it's the earthquake is the warning. So if you feel shaking, and of course the first thing you do is drop, cover, and hold, and you need to start counting slowly to 20.
The right way. How do you do that?
Oh, I teach kids to do it with their favorite things. So 1 chocolate, 2 chocolate, 3 chocolate, but you can count anything you like. And if you're thinking of something happy, that helps. Especially helps kids, but it'll help your psyche.
So you don't speed up because you're getting stressed out.
Right. It actually lowers your heart rate.
Interesting.
You know, so if you think of something you love and practice that. So you're in an earthquake, you're under the table, you're next to the ocean. Right. This is important if you're next to the ocean. If you're not next to the ocean, don't worry about it. Just stay in place under cover.
And you're talking about a mile, a quarter mile? What's close?
A mile, even a couple miles. You know, our rule of thumb used to be a mile inland was safe, but the last few tsunamis have taught us otherwise. So, yeah, you know, in Japan we had an inundation up to 10 miles. So.
And that was a big quake.
That was a big quake.
So you have a quake, you're counting slowly to 20.
To 20.
What's next?
And if you get to 20 and it's still shaking, you need to evacuate. And that is, that's scary.
Yeah.
Because you're evacuating in a live event that's still shaking. You know, 1964 shook for 4.5 minutes. Indonesia shook for 12 minutes.
Wow.
Japan, I think, shook for 6. I'm not sure of that, but it was long. Anyway, more than 20 seconds.
And that's a sign of a very major earthquake, the worst.
Well, 20 seconds is a magnitude 7, so that's not the worst. But what a magnitude 7 can do is trigger a landslide. And those landslides might be a submarine landslide, so you won't see it, you won't hear it, you won't know it, and then the water's moving. So that's really, really, really dangerous. That's what happened in '64 first. Seward, Valdez, Whittier all had landslides first.
And when you're talking about the water is a warning sign too. What happens with the water that gives you a very easy visual sign that something's changing?
Not guaranteed. It might go out, it might go way out really fast enough to leave the fish behind, but that's not guaranteed. It might just be a fast flood instead. So either way, if it's acting like a super fast rising tide, faster than a tide should rise, get out of there. And if it goes out really fast, get out of there. You know, we lost a lot of lives because people will go check out the new tide pools or
Sure.
pick up fish or shells or, you know, so, and it should feel weird.
Right.
You know, it should be weird.
So pay attention to those natural warning signs and how you feel, because those are maybe the only clues you have.
Right, and you know, sound also. You can hear a tsunami. It'll sound like a roaring train, maybe.
Okay.
Or it might sound silent because the water's been pulled out.
Right.
And that's pretty weird. Imagine camping
Yeah.
at night
Yeah.
near the beach, and all of a sudden you don't hear the ocean anymore.
That would be different.
That would be weird. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you also might hear blowing bubbles, and that's actually from the pressure that's blowing the air out from the sand grains, rock grains.
Interesting.
So if you hear blowing bubbles, that's a little weird.
Okay.
Or clinking rocks, you know, like a rain stick. So those are the sound signs. So the visual is rushing in or rushing out, and roaring especially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of work to get people and keep people aware of what the tsunami warning signs are and what the risks are around Alaska. And there's a website that can help them do that. Where can they go online to get more information for their school, their home, their church, their business?
Oh, there's several. The National Tsunami Warning Center has a website as well, and the easiest way to look that up is just NTWC.
NTWC.
The URL is not intuitive at all.
Okay.
There's also ready.alaska.gov. The state of Alaska has a lot of helpful stuff. Preparedness kits. They have everything you need to get ready.
Okay.
And then for teachers and others, there's a wonderful curriculum called Alaska Tsunami Education Program.
Alaska Tsunami Education Program. Okay.
And that's AKwx.
AKwx. Okay, very good. Those are really good tips to get more information and search that out and help your own community stay safe with the threat of tsunamis around Alaska. Next time we come back and talk to you some more about the Tsunami Ready program and get more in depth and how people can learn more about the risks and what to do here in Alaska. So thank you for joining us today, Cindy. And next time on Alaska Weather Facts, more on tsunamis around Alaska. We'll see you next time. Now, as we look out in the Bering Sea, remember I was saying the ice edge was kind of creeping its way towards St. Paul. The latest guesstimate is about 45 to 50 nautical miles or so northeast of St. Paul. As long as this pattern continues, the ice will continue to grow in your direction. However, warmer air out to the west is really pretty close, and we are going to see some southerly winds develop around the region as we get into the latter part of the week. In the meantime, there's still plenty of ice in Cook Inlet as well. A lot of the concentration there is above 80%. You can always check this out anytime you want at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. In southeast, northerlies will be blustery through the Lynn Canal, 30 knots with a 6-foot sea. Southeasterlies coming up through Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait, 25 to 35, 5 to 6-foot seas there. Otherwise, it's southerlies up the outer coast with 11 to 12-foot seas south of Sitka, more of an offshore flow as you approach Yakutat and Cross Sound. 30-knot wind there with a 10-foot sea. As you get into Thursday, higher gusts will develop. Some of these could be as strong as 45 knots. Otherwise, southerlies diminish a bit down the outer coast up to 25 knots with 10-foot seas down south. Northerlies continue in the Lynn Canal, 35 knots with a 7-foot sea, and southeasterlies inside of Clarence Strait, 30 knots with a 6-foot sea there on Thursday. South Central, the strongest winds will be across the northern Gulf and then across the far western Gulf around the Barrens. And this is where you'll see some of the highest seas as well, 10 to 13-foot seas around the Barrens. Northerlies coming down through Cook Inlet, 25 to 30, 40 knots around Shelikof Strait from the north and west, and then 45 knots east of the Barrens and through Sitkinak and east of Kodiak Island. As you get into Thursday, northerlies continue inside of Prince William Sound, 25 knots there, 30 to as strong as 45 knots outside of Resurrection Bay, and then across the Barrens again is where we get into that strong outflow, 40 to 45, 11-foot seas there, 25 to 30 knots in Cook Inlet, and 35 knots, diminishing a little bit from Wednesday in Shelikof Strait with an 8-foot sea. Across Bristol Bay, 30 knots from the north and west. That speeds up to 45 knots as you get down from Castle Cape to Chignik. 13-foot seas expected there with higher gusts expected as well. Northerlies for the Bering Sea coast. And looks like an 8-foot sea there with 9-foot seas across the Pacific coast around Sand Point, 30 knots. Not a whole lot of a change on Thursday, down to 25 knots over Bristol Bay. Northerlies continue for the Bering Sea coast and 45 knots from Castle Cape to Chignik with 15-foot seas and higher gusts continue in the region for Thursday. For the Aleutians, winds diminish a little bit as you head west. You can see 10 to 15 knots there from Nikolsky to Atka, 20 to 25 around Unalaska to Nikolsky on either side, 5-foot seas as well. Southeasterlies west of Adak to Kiska all the way out towards Shemya, 5 to 9-foot seas expected for Wednesday. By Thursday, that comes up to 35 to 40. Notice across the central chain, 20 to 30 knots with 3 to 6-foot seas, 4 to 8-foot seas on the Pacific coast, and light northeasterly winds north of Unalaska and Nikolsky, but northerlies are a little bit stronger south of the chain along the Pacific coast, 30 knots with a 5-foot sea from the north. Wednesday across the west coast, northerlies coming down from St. Lawrence Island through Nunivak Island, picking up a little bit more around the Kuskokwim Delta region, 25 knots. Northerlies for St. Paul and St. George, and southeasterlies around the open waters of St. Matthew, 2-foot seas expected there. And look, see how the south and westerly winds start to develop a little bit. Southerlies reverse course there as you get up toward Nunivak Island and St. Lawrence Island. We're going to hold on to the northerlies here across the Kuskokwim Delta region, 25 knots, still over the ice. So again, we're still watching that ice there just northeast of St. Paul. For the Arctic coast, westerlies from Point Ley all the way out toward Kaktovik, 10 to as high as 20 knots. Northwesterlies coming ashore around Cape Lisburn, Point Hope, Kivalina, Kotzebue Sound. Those around 10 to 15 knots. For Thursday, southerlies make it north of the Bering Strait again, 10 to as high as 25 knots around Cape Lisburn. And south and westerly winds continue for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast on your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, low pressures in the eastern Gulf, and there it should stay for the next several days. That keeps wind across south central and the Alaska Range and over southwest and through Cook Inlet and Kodiak Island. But continued onshore and wet flow for southeast means winter storm warnings north of the Taku Inlet around the Juneau region. Could see 4 to 8 inches of snow, and some of that this evening and overnight could go at 1 inch an hour. So be prepared for some periods and waves of heavy snow. North of that, it's a winter weather advisory for the Haynesboro and westward, 3 to 5 inches in your area. As you see by tomorrow, the front and the low pressure system pretty much parks across the eastern Gulf and keeps things status quo across the rest of Alaska going through the week. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.